John, let me just follow up on what is it exactly that you object to? I mean, I understand all the humanitarian and bloodshed that is ongoing and so on, but why do you object to the regime retaking eastern Aleppo? I mean, western Aleppo, or the larger part of Aleppo, lives in, I mean, relative peace and so on. The other towns that the regime has regained, life goes on relatively. So what is it that you object to, considering that, you know, a sizable number of Nusra and other terrorist groups that you consider terrorists are actually in eastern Aleppo? So why do you object to the regime regaining Aleppo?
What we object to, Saeed, is the violence against the Syrian people, and infrastructure in Aleppo, and hospitals, first responders. What we object to is the violence. We want to see the violence end so that humanitarian aid can come in, and we want to see the resumption of political talks between the opposition and the regime. And we've long said, and yes, I recognize that back in February when we achieved an ISSG agreement on the cessation of hostilities, and what we saw for a couple of months after that was a dramatic reduction in violence, something on the order of 70–80% based on how you measure it. So it's possible to get there, and what we said back then was that we didn't want to see the regime taking or retaking additional territory. We wanted a freeze on the hostilities. So that's what we're after here. And I think, you don't have to take my word for it, you can look at media coverage of what's going on in Aleppo, that efforts by the regime to retake a block, a street, a building, a part of the city, east, west, it doesn't matter, any effort is obviously going to lead to more violence and more death for the Syrian people.
So just to be clear, you believe that the regime, by not taking eastern Aleppo, they will be placed in a more, let's say, flexible negotiating position for the future? Is that it?
Who will be put in a more
the
flexible?
regime? Do you think that they will be more flexible in terms of negotiating?
I can't get inside the head of Bashar al-Assad. I've seen, obviously, you know, that there are those who think that the continued siege of Aleppo is intended to provide more leverage at the negotiating table. Our view is that that's a false narrative. That all the siege of Aleppo is going to continue to do is inspire the opposition to fight back even harder, and make it that much more difficult for anybody to agree to a cessation of hostilities and to get us to political talks.
Okay, so I just want to understand the sharing, let's say, of power in Aleppo. You know, the eastern side being controlled by the opposition and the western side being controlled by the regime is more conducive to a negotiated settlement. Is that what you think?
I didn't say that, and we're not. I'm not parsing East Aleppo or West Aleppo. We're talking about the entire city of Aleppo here. That's our focus. We're not drawing a line on the map and saying you can have this and you can have that. What we want to see is the siege of Aleppo stop. We want to see the violence stop, and we want to see the aid get in for everybody in Aleppo, regardless of where they live.
And maintaining the status quo, maintaining the current status quo with forces on either side being entrenched where they are.
Well, I'm not an expert on what you call the status quo. What we want to see is the siege of Aleppo stop, Saeed. We want to see aid trucks move in. We don't want to have to see civilians make a difficult choice about whether they should leave or go, or choose between Daesh and the Assad regime. They should be able to live peaceably and in their own town, in their own city, and shouldn't have to worry about barrel bombs dropping from the sky. That's what we want to see. This isn't about, you know, again, I don't know what you mean by status quo. If you mean like as of today, the situation in today, if we're going to start from today, that we would absolutely not consider that a great starting point here. I mean, look at what's going on in the city.